Everyone says INFJs are too self-aware to have a shadow, that you see too deeply into others to miss what lives inside yourself. But here is the question that actually matters. If you see so clearly, why does the same wound keep opening? Why does the same pattern keep arriving in different faces, different years, different rooms? There is something moving beneath the self-awareness, and the common explanation does not touch it. There is a kind of person who has always been here. They go by different names in different centuries. The cunning woman, the hermit, the witness, the seer, the exile. The world has tried more than once to be rid of them. The world has never managed it. If you carry one of these patterns, you already know. Today, shadow work, not the version that tells you to journal your feelings and release your triggers, the older version, the one Carl Jung actually meant. You have probably been told that shadow work is about accepting your darkness, that it is about loving the parts of yourself you have hidden. The anger you were taught was too much. The need you were taught was too demanding. The ambition you learned to mask as service. This explanation is not wrong. The shadow does carry those things. Jung himself described the shadow as the repository of everything the ego has rejected, the qualities that felt too dangerous, too shameful, or simply too large to hold in the light of day. And you have probably done this work, or tried to. You are an INFJ. You have spent years examining yourself with a precision most people reserve for other people. You have read the books. You have named your patterns. You have sat with your grief. You have done the inventory of what was done to you and what you inherited. But something is still there. Something that the inventory did not touch. You catch yourself reacting in a way that does not match who you understand yourself to be. A coldness that arrives without warning. A contempt you do not endorse but cannot stop feeling. A cruelty in your private thoughts toward the exact people you love most. A hunger that feels shameful, enormous, and entirely at odds with your values. You know this is not you at your best. You have explained it to yourself as stress, as tiredness, as old wounds getting pressed. And that is not wrong. But it is not the full account. Here is what the standard shadow work framework misses. It treats the shadow as a collection of bad traits you need to acknowledge and accept. It positions integration as a kind of emotional housekeeping. Make peace with your anger. Stop suppressing your needs. Allow yourself to be less perfect. This is not useless. But for the INFJ, it stops at the surface. Because the INFJ's shadow is not primarily a collection of suppressed traits. It is a suppressed mode of being. And this is where the standard framework begins to break down. If integration is simply the acceptance of suppressed traits, why does accepting your anger not stop it from erupting sideways? Why does naming your need for recognition not dissolve the resentment when it goes unmet? Why does the part of you that watches coldly during intimacy remain unmoved by the insight that it is a defense mechanism? These things stay in place not because you have not accepted them. They stay in place because acceptance alone does not complete the circuit. Consider what actually happens when the shadow erupts in an INFJ. It is not gradual, it is not proportionate. The trigger is frequently small, even trivial, and the response has a quality of possession about it. Something has taken over, something that does not share your values, does not care about your relationships, does not recognize the person you have spent years trying to become. Jung had a name for this. He called it the inferior function. And for the INFJ, this is not a minor psychological footnote. It is the structure of your suffering. The INFJ's primary cognitive function is introverted intuition. NEI, the function that processes patterns below the surface. That synthesizes information the conscious mind has not fully registered, that perceives what is coming before it arrives. This is the function the INFJ lives inside. It is the function that the world around you has rarely been able to see or value. But the inferior function, the one that sits at the very bottom of your cognitive hierarchy, is extraverted sensing. SE, direct physical reality, the immediate, sensory, embodied present. The world of what is here, right now, in front of you. Say is the function you trust least, the function you have had the least practice with, the function that, when the psyche comes under enough pressure, erupts in the crudest, most uncontrolled form. This is why the INFJ shadow does not look like sophisticated darkness. It looks like a toddler with the keys to a car. Overconsumption, sensory excess, a sudden overwhelming need for physical sensation, pleasure, indulgence, an inability to stop eating, drinking, sleeping, consuming content, buying things or touching screens. A fixation on the immediate and the physical so total that the subtle, intuitive, meaning-making self simply goes offline, or the opposite, a kind of frozen sensory paralysis, an inability to engage with the physical world at all, to leave the house, to eat, to perform the most basic maintenance of the body. This is not depression, though it can look like it. This is not moral failure, though it can feel like it. This is the inferior function selenium erupting without the guidance of the dominant function any. The shadow does not arrive as a dark twin of your best self. It arrives as the rawest, most developmentally unfinished version of your least practiced mode of being in the world. The standard shadow work framework tells you to accept this, to love it, to integrate it. But you cannot integrate something you have not correctly named. What Jung actually meant by integration was not acceptance. It was the development of a relationship between the ego and the unconscious, between the nigh-dominant mind and its shadow functions, between the sophisticated, pattern-reading self and the crude, immediate sensory self that it has spent a lifetime trying to transcend. This is the wounded healer archetype, and I want you to hear this carefully. In Jungian psychology, the wounded healer is not a person who has been healed. It is a person who has learned to work alongside the wound, to use it, to let the depth of their own injury be the instrument of their perception. Jung's source for this archetype was Chiron, the centaur, half human, half animal. The most gifted healer in Greek myth, teacher to Achilles and Asclepius, and wounded by a poisoned arrow that would never heal. Chiron could heal others. He could not heal himself. His wound was permanent. And it was precisely the permanence of the wound that made his perception of others' wounds so exact. This is the structure beneath your shadow work. The INFJ who is doing genuine integration is not working to eliminate their inferior function or to make peace with the parts of themselves that erupt in crisis. They are developing a relationship with those parts, not dominance, not suppression. Relationship. The nigh-dominant mind learning to hear what SE is registering, learning to use the body's signals rather than overriding them, learning to be present in physical reality for short, deliberate periods rather than staying permanently in the abstract. The shadow erupts when the inferior function has been ignored for too long, when the body has been overridden, when physical reality has been filtered through intuition until the signal is too distorted to read. The eruption is not failure, it is the psyche demanding balance. And the wound, the one the wounded healer carries, is this. The INFJ will never be fully at home in immediate physical reality the way NC dominant type is. The gap does not close. The inferior function does not become the dominant one through effort or intention. The integration process is not the closing of that gap. It is learning to work at the edge of it without falling in. These are not supernatural claims. They are descriptions of how introverted intuition and extraverted sensing function within the cognitive hierarchy. Jung spent decades mapping these dynamics in his clinical practice. The collective unconscious is his term for the shared psychological structures that carry these patterns across cultures and time. The archetypes are the forms that structures take when they surface in individual psychology. What this means in practice is this. When the shadow erupts, the question is not what is wrong with me. The question is what has been ignored for too long. What sensory, physical, embodied reality has the nigh-dominant mind been filtering out until the pressure became unsustainable? And what the wounded healer understands over time is that the wound itself is the instrument. The INFJ who has crossed the threshold of their own shadow, who has stood inside the eruption and come back with a name for what they found there, carries a specific kind of perception. They can see this pattern in others with the precision that only comes from having inhabited it. That perception is not transferable by theory, it is earned only by staying in the room with the wound until you understand its shape. If this has landed somewhere it needed to land, then you may already know what comes next. There are 7 Sigma INFJ archetypes, and each one carries a different gift, a different burden, a different mythic responsibility. The link in the description will take you to a free assessment that reveals yours. It takes about 3 minutes. The answer tends to land harder than people expect. And if you want to keep walking these threads with me, into the deeper psychology of the Sigma INFJ, into the archetypes the world has forgotten how to name, subscribe. There are far older and stranger things still to uncover. Until next time. Find your power, know your myth,